We are 30 minutes into the U.S. trading day on this Monday, June 3rd. Here are the top stories we're following. JP Morgan versus Morgan Stanley. Diverging outlooks on the rally, with JP Morgan strategists warning of capped upside, while Morgan Stanley's Mike Wilson says that the bulls have the benefit of the doubt. A peek at private markets with Sohail Prasad of the Destiny Tech 100 Fund, a closed-end fund that invests in private tech startups. After soaring to an eye-popping premium relative to its NAV back in April, the fund's price has since settled. We'll discuss. And betting on remodeling, Trex, it's a leader in weatherproof decking. It's doubling down on the remodeling market with a $450 million commitment to build a factory in Arkansas. That's even as DIYers hit pause. CEO Brian Fairbanks joins in just a bit. Conversation going now with Brian Fairbanks. He is the CEO of Trex. He is sitting next to me in studio. It's great to meet you.
Good morning. Great to be here. Thanks.
So let's talk about what you're known for, because your decks, they look like wood, but they're not. You know, people aren't moving around. There's not a ton of new construction yet, but it sounds like from your standpoint, that's maybe actually a good thing, because maybe people will want to repair the homes that they're in.
Yeah, oddly enough.
Recent earnings reports from Home Depot, Lowe's, for example, the common thread there was that DIY renovation, home improvement, it seemed to be slowing down, but that's not necessarily what you're seeing in your business if you take a look at the report you delivered back in May. So walk us through how your customer base is different from some of the names we might be more familiar with. Interesting. You're building a factory in Little Rock, Arkansas right now, spending about $450 million to do that. If you take a look at some industry reports, there's an annual decline in home improvement spending expected. That would be the first time we've seen that since the late 2000s or so. So in some ways, it feels like you're expanding into a downturn. Does that give you any pause? Because, of course, you're building this factory in the South. You talk about heat mitigating decks. I think it's hot in the South. It seems like the stars are aligning for a southern expansion here.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. When we looked at where we wanted to be.
Yes, I mean, when a company builds a new factory, what does the pro-con list look like when it comes to deciding between whether to actually break ground on a new facility versus just expand at an existing plant, for example? A little bit more about your pricing strategy. You mentioned that, you know, the high-end consumer is a really strong segment for you right now, not necessarily seeing the trade down that you're seeing in other industries. But even still, have you thought about lowering prices? How are you approaching that right now?
Our Enhanced Natural series at about $3.50, and then we move up to Select, Transcend, all the way up to our Transcend product lines, which are going to be $6.25, $7 a linear foot.
Decks right now in the U.S. are probably unsafe, but even still, do you see people delaying more than they might have had we been having this conversation in a different economic condition? Great to get some time with you. Our thanks to Brian Fairbanks. He is the CEO of Trex. And let's get an update on these markets. About an hour into the U.S. trading day, we're going to do that with Abigail Doolittle. The CHIPS Act.
Yeah, they're finally implementing it. So we're going to figure out exactly where we are up this week. We're going to talk to him about the deal situation.
To David Wesson. And we do have an update on those technical issues over at the New York Stock Exchange. Trading resumed for some of the NYSE stocks that were halted. More on that story coming up next. This is Bloomberg. So let's talk about this new product. I am very familiar with Normatec, have used it many times. I ran in college. But in any case, this new product, the Normatec Elite, announced today. Who is this for? Is this for professionals, or is this for, you know, individuals to buy and put in their homes?
Well, the easy answer is, yeah, traveling really wasn't an issue beforehand, but just
because you talk about athletes, you talk about individuals. What segment are you actually focusing on? Where are you putting the most muscle into right now?
So we divide the market into,
you know, how much of a focus is selling to universities, for example, getting those types of deals and contracts when it comes to schools, colleges, universities, but also potentially gyms, for example? Inflation, of course, maybe the labor market weakening a little bit. How has that impacted your customer base? Are you seeing any noticeable softening when it comes to your sales? Their products, when it comes specifically to these compression sleeves, are you competing against masseuses?
not competing against
the limits in a legal manner. You think about the development of super shoes, for example, when it comes to running. That obviously has led to some big breakthroughs there. But I want to talk a little bit more about Hyperice's broader business, because there's also the Hypervolt, which is basically a massage gun. And you think about the competitive landscape there. Theragun, for example, is popular as well. How do you compete there?
Sure. So
I'm not going to spend the whole time there, but you said last week that actually there's still a lot of uncertainty in the CRE market. Where is that uncertainty right now?
Yeah,
Opportunity when it comes to CRE, but office still a little shaky there. But you went where I wanted to go, and that is the Fed, because this is a Fed that would certainly like to cut rates, but the data just doesn't back it up there. So if we are truly in a higher for longer interest rate environment, what does that mean for CRE, and what does that mean for regional banks as a whole? Longer a little bit more, because you think about the effect that that has had on money market funds, for example. Money markets offering 5% and above, that's really attractive for a lot of people. And I'm wondering, when it comes to competing with cash, how has that looked on the deposit side?
yeah. So I'd say most of the
Is that another hike would certainly be disruptive.
yes. I don't really see that. I think that's a very low probability case.
Talk about where you are playing offense. I want to talk about your efforts in private banking in particular. How has that push been going?
It's been great, really. So we stepped into.
Sounds like you're hiring from your rivals to really fuel this expansion.
Yeah. So this is a fairly sizable.
Do you see specifically in New York City?
Yeah. So the New York strategy.
But you mentioned, I mean, you just rattled off a whole list of acquisitions that you've done. And it's interesting, if you take a look at the landscape right now, you've had PNC, for example, talking about the need to do bigger M&A, to get bigger through M&A. And I mean, is that your strategy as well? Would you say that you're pursuing a growth by acquisition strategy?
No.